All right. Hello, everyone. I am Megan Sassenhausen. I'm the event coordinator at Heritage Christian Services, and I am excited to welcome you to our second webinar in our webinar series of 2023, Elevating Direct Support Professionals. We have two additional webinars after this one, and we encourage you to view them at the webinar landing page. I would like to welcome Donna Mostiller, our presenter for this evening's webinar. Now, she has a lot of very important information to go over, so unfortunately, we will not have time for questions tonight, but in the survey that I will send after the webinar, there's a space to ask questions, and you can also send me those questions via email. And so now I will turn it over to Donna.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about a topic that means so much to us at Heritage Christian Services. My name is Donna Mostiller, and I serve as the Senior Vice President of People and Culture. My role requires me to focus on the employee experience, all the employees at Heritage Christian Services, and so the experience of our direct support professionals is critically important to me. As we look at some of the work being done in other industries, we know that there is a focus on how the employee experience influences or impacts those who receive services. How many times have you have you had a bad day and encountered a clerk or a nurse or some other frontline worker whose enthusiasm and passion just brightened your day? Your impression of that employer probably improved, and overall, you felt very good about continuing that relationship. The work of our direct support staff is critically important to so many with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It is important for us to create a positive environment and a positive employment experience for our staff so that it translates into a positive experience for those who we provide supports for. Over the past several months, we have worked to create guideposts for our future. Through numerous meetings, conversations, phone calls, prayers, and perhaps even the shedding of a few tears, we've arrived upon the vision statement that you see in front of you. Elevating love and care by elevating the experience of the caring professional. Now, while the term caring professional includes all of us at Heritage Christian Services, it holds a very special meaning for those who more closely support the individuals from our communities who receive our services. And it is our hope that these individuals will experience both love and care through their affiliation with Heritage Christian Services. To better understand direct support professionals, we have to look at frontline staff, the larger group of workers in the United States to which direct support professionals belong. We may remember how frontline staff received a great deal of attention during the pandemic because it became incredibly clear to all of us that these workers were extraordinarily important to all of our lives and to our economy. I remember my very first job. I worked during the summer in a transportation program for seniors. I didn't drive, but I was the dispatcher. I interacted with all of the seniors as they called to schedule their appointments and when they called in to check on the status of their rides. I was a frontline worker. My attitude influenced the experience of all those seniors who called in as they relied on our services to get them to the grocery store or to a medical appointment or to church or to visit a family member. I did realize that while I enjoyed the job immensely, I didn't think it was something that I would do for the rest of my life. And so, like so many others who start their careers as frontline workers, I developed a pathway to find a position that met my experiences, skills, interests, and aptitudes. Frontline workers make up the majority of the workers in the US. And frontline jobs are often a starting point and an end point for so many workers. And that's a challenge for us because sometimes frontline workers think they are in jobs with no opportunity for growth, no opportunity for advancement, and no opportunity for a stronger economic future. With over 112 million workers, this workforce is huge. It is really, really huge. And for many, the work is deeply satisfying. In fact, the workers here at Heritage Christian Services have often shared with us that the work that they do, they find tremendously satisfying. However, sometimes these jobs do not provide enough money for people to support their families. The economic reality is that one small setback, a major car repair, an increase in rent, an unexpected energy bill, can have tremendous negative ramifications for frontline staff. As this slide shows, many frontline workers earn low to modest wages while being the face of the organizations where they work. So let's talk a little bit about who makes up this frontline workforce. And I don't know about you, I find these statistics to be a bit surprising. To hear that almost 80% of frontline workers in the US don't have a 4-year college degree. To hear that 20% are under 25 years old. So I should qualify that only 20% are under ages 25. So just looking at those two statistics suggest that recent college graduates are not finding their way into this part of our workforce. And that's a really interesting takeaway from these numbers. The frontline workforce is increasingly becoming diverse racially and ethnically, with 42% identifying as people of color. And for Black and Latino workers in the United States, more than 70% of them are in frontline roles. It's an extraordinarily diverse workforce. And to highlight some of the economic implications, only 30% of them will move into a higher income bracket over the course of their careers, thereby adding to the impression that these jobs don't have futures. So while many employers are trying to recruit talent from this pool, it's important that we understand these group dynamics. This can help us to understand what is important to the people who work in frontline roles, and it helps us to appreciate what we can do as employers to help them achieve their professional goals. Let's get back to economics. Frontline workers are often viewed as being economically insecure, which, defined by PolicyLink, means that their annual income is only 200% of the federal poverty level. So for a single person, that comes out to be about $27,000 a year. And for a family of three, it's about $46,000 a year. When we look at some additional statistics, we see that 50% make less than $30,000 per year, and only 15% make more than $50,000 per year. When you add another lens to this and look at these numbers and how it impacts people from racial and ethnic groups that are overrepresented as frontline workers, but perhaps underrepresented in the workplace in general, typically they have larger numbers of people in their households. And yet, they often report that they earn less than those who are not from the same groups and who have smaller households. So disparities exist within this frontline group. And as employers, it's so very important that we examine our pay practices to make sure that those disparities are addressed. So let's talk a little bit about engagement. We talk about engagement a lot at Heritage Christian Services because it's really important to appreciate how connected employees are, not only to the work that they do, but how they feel about where they work. And what we have learned is that, surprise, surprise, diversity, equity, and inclusion work really matters to this workforce, particularly younger members of this workforce, as well as people from what could be described as underrepresented groups. And yet, they do not view diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as having a true impact in the workplace. There's still a disconnect, primarily due to perceptions that there's a lack of fairness with promotions. So what does that mean really? And what are they telling us? Well, they're saying that they don't see how people get promotions in the workplace. Now, we know that happens sometimes. Sometimes people get promotions and it's announced and people wonder, how'd that happen? But particularly for frontline workers who may be more removed from the inner workings of an organization, this can be very, very unsettling. They also report a lack of sponsorship and mentors within the organization. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but simply stated, it's really having someone with more experience who makes themselves available to talk to you, to hear what's going on in your life, to give you some advice and help you along your way. Those types of connections, it's been demonstrated time and time and time again, are critically important in helping people stay connected, feel engaged, and be successful at work. And remember, the more successful people feel about the work that they're doing, the better the experience for people who receive services. What else do they tell us? They don't understand how to get more training and explore professional development opportunities. They don't understand how that works within their organizations. And then finally, for those of them who want to grow, want to advance, want to learn more skills, and quite frankly, want to earn more money, they don't feel there's a way to get on anyone's radar. And how do they do that? And how do they advance within the organization? As employers, this is really useful information because the response to that can be very, very clear and come very, very quickly from management. So let's talk a little bit about what that might look like. So to promote engagement, what we can do is create clear pathways for advancement. That means communicating when opportunities are available and communicating them broadly. It's tied to treating all workers with respect, not just telling some people about how to get ahead, but making sure that you're talking to everyone, in particular, those who are at the front lines, who are the face of the organization, treating them with the same level of respect as people in middle management and upper management levels. How do we create a culture of fairness, equity, respect, and here's the surprise word that we hear from employees, merit. If people are going to advance, let it be on merit, because I can possibly compete on merit. But if there's something else that's leading people to grow and advance, and I'm not aware of it, that doesn't seem fair to me. So these things help us create a corporate culture, a workforce culture, where people can readily engage and have a better experience. In sum, what we're learning is that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts do matter, but they're part and parcel of the work that we need to do to build a positive workforce culture. So let's look at some groups and what they tell us about their experience and why DEI matters. So if we look at African Americans as a group, what have African Americans shared with us due to research about their experience as frontline workers? Overall, they report that they are less likely to feel supported, encouraged, and treated as professional equals as their peers. They also report that they lack valuable direction and support on career paths and development. And while 84% of Black employees indicate a desire to be promoted, only 62% perceive an opportunity to advance. We can do better with this. It's interesting, that second bullet about lacking valuable direction and support. Not too long ago, there was similar research done by Forbes, which looked at not Black workers in general from the front line, but looked at Black workers, Black women in the workforce across the board. And the same theme appeared. The inability to get constructive feedback towards people from career advancement opportunities, and it doesn't propel them forward within an organization. It is an easy thing to address. And so going forward, hopefully, many employers will address this issue within their organizations. If we look at the Asian American frontline experience, there's some similarities here. Like African American employees, they report that they are not earning the same as their white peers. And so employers have an opportunity to look at their pay practices, to ensure that there's equity across the board, regardless of gender and race and ethnicity within their organizations. They also report feeling unsupported, with more than half saying they don't have a sponsor within their organization, which we've already discussed is important for people to feel connected. Finally, and this is somewhat interesting, Asian workers feel that they're often stereotyped as being diligent and quiet. And these perceptions can limit their opportunities to move into management positions. Finally, the diversity of Asian Americans is sometimes overlooked, but Asian workers represent a wide array of nationalities and subgroups, each of them having their own distinct experience, particularly in the U.S. workforce. And now let's talk about the Latino American experience. Latino workers are more likely than any other race to be in frontline roles. They're also inclined to report lower wages, earning 22% than their white peers. So that's a similar theme. And they report not feeling included or supported on the job. Again, a similar theme as the other work groups. And then finally, as an immigrant group, Latinos are the largest immigrant group by race in the frontline workforce. And so where does that take us? That takes us to a conversation about how do we help people move forward in their careers, particularly those who really want to move. How do we overcome a perception that these are dead-end, unsatisfying jobs, which they are not, and help people really find deeper levels of satisfaction in the roles that they have? Well, one way is that we can look at a challenge that we have as employers, which is that simply looking at people of color within our workforces, there is a significant gap in their ability to move from hourly frontline workers into frontline manager or supervisory roles. We have to ask the question, what barriers might there be in our own organizations that are keeping people who want to grow, who want to advance, from fulfilling their aspirations and dreams? And what can we do as employers to create easier pathways, or certainly pathways with no barriers for those who are so inclined? That is something that we can do and we can focus on as we go forward. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship. Subtle difference. Mentorship is defined as a more senior person within an organization who offers their time, attention, talent to talk to more junior workers, to hear what's happening in junior workers' work experience, to offer some insight, some advice, to serve as a sounding board. That's generally what a mentor does. A sponsor is a more active participant in that employee's career development. This person is the person who's in the room who's going to say that employee's name when that employee is in the room. This is the person who's going to say, have we thought about Donna Mostiller? She seemed really interested in developing or learning new skills or advancing. And I saw her do this, this, and this. I think we should give her another look. We know this works. For those of us who have been privileged to have careers in management, we know this works. We know this happens. And yet, frontline staff are saying they don't have sponsors. And therefore, their access to developmental opportunities are limited. The other things that sponsors do is that they promote visibility in projects. They put a person's name forward for promotions and other job opportunities. Or they circle back to that employee and say, hey, I don't know if you know, but this is coming down the road. You should get yourself together, get your resume together so you can apply. Perhaps many people on this call have had sponsors in their careers, someone who's pulled their coat and said, you know, if you want to advance, you need to do this. You know, if you want to get ahead, you need to try that. But again, so many people on the front line don't have that experience, and it's critically important. Finally, and this is just no leap of faith, it just makes sense that when people have sponsors who are looking out for them, who are advocating for them, who are helping them to feel connected to someone within the organization, this promotes a sense of feeling included and belonging. And what do we know about that? That leads to higher levels of engagement. That leads to a positive experience in the workplace. And that shows itself in how a person delivers support and services to people within the community. So why are career pathways important? So there are lots of reasons why. I'm of the opinion that there are lots of people who are curious by nature. There are lots of people who are driven by nature. There are lots of people who are committed to quality by nature. And I think there are lots of them in our front line. We have to help them identify ways to advance professionally. And it doesn't necessarily mean going back to school and getting a 4-year degree. There are things that can be put in place to help people continue to make steady, incremental gains, not only in the skills that they have, but also to earning more money. We talked earlier about economic insecurity and how disruptive that can be in the workplace. Certainly, it impacts the employer when someone calls off because their car broke down and now we have staffing challenges. It impacts the people that that employee works with because now someone has to either work later or pick up some additional responsibilities so that the work can be continued. Perhaps most importantly, it impacts the person who's receiving services. It may mean that it's someone that they're not familiar with, now it's going to support them. And if they're anything like me, that may make them feel uncomfortable. We all have our comforts with, this is Donna's day to come, and then Donna doesn't come, and Bob comes. Well, that can be a little bit disruptive to a person, I would think. So, trying to make sure that people have greater economic security so that when these things happen, their experience in the workplace is not disruptive is important for us to address. So, how do we help? How do we make this happen? We build a framework within our organizations to help employees and frontline managers understand that a career path is possible, movement is possible, ways to satisfy that drive or ambition is possible within the field that you've chosen, within the field that you've chosen. So let's talk a little bit about direct care workers. Direct care workers are a subset of the frontline, and they make up about 5 million Americans currently in the US who work in these types of jobs. Interestingly enough, due to demand, there would be more new jobs in this particular occupation, according to the Department of Labor, than any other occupation in the United States. This is where the demand is. And so if the demand is here, how do we make these jobs more attractive, more appealing to more people? And how do we get those who are skilled in this space to remain? Because our country is going to need them. But before we talk about demand in greater detail, let's talk about the demographics again. 86% of the people who work in direct care are women. 59% identify as people of color, and 26% are immigrants to the United States. It is a diverse workforce, possibly even more so than what we saw when we looked at the demographics for frontline workers. The economic realities persist. 15% live below the federal poverty level, and 44% live below that 200% of the federal poverty level threshold that we talked about earlier. So that's about $27,000 for a single person and about $46,000 for a family of 3. You can see here even the economic insecurity persists. Where do they work? Home care workers, residential care aides, nursing assistants, and direct care workers in other industries. So you might be curious. We're talking about direct support professionals here. What category are they in? Well, depends on who you ask. Sometimes direct support professionals are included under home care workers. Sometimes they're included under residential care aides. And sometimes they're included under direct care workers in other industries. And that is due in part to the fact that direct support professionals as a group do not have a federal standard occupation code, which means that while the federal government does collect data on direct support professionals, it doesn't separate that data out and assign it to direct support professionals, but rather it can be assigned to home care workers, residential care aides, or just direct care workers in other industries. And so that's not particularly helpful to us as we try to understand the unique elements of this workforce. And so we have to rely more heavily on direct care workers as a whole to understand some of the unique elements of direct support professionals, excuse me. So let's go back to demand for a moment, as this is pretty significant. Our society in the United States is aging. Adults over 65 in the next 40 years or so, it's going to almost double in size. While adults between 18 and 64, the same time period, is going to remain relatively stable, which means that the demand for direct care workers is going to be very, very, very significant. Couple that with some other cultural or social components of how we live in the United States, that we tend to live in smaller households. We generally don't live with extended family members. We often live some distance away from our families. And that only increases the demand, particularly as we age. And so, more likely than not, there are going to be fewer potential paid and unpaid caregivers, or if you prefer, direct care workers to support older adults or anyone as we head into the future. This is such a serious matter because on any given day, any one of us can experience a life-changing event that will require us to have additional support or additional care within our home or within some type of facility. And if this situation doesn't get remedied, there will not be enough people who are skilled and able to provide that type of support. And that's fundamentally what this is about. We have to change the scenario. Let's talk a little bit about direct support professionals. Imagine most of the people on this call understand that direct support professionals do incredible work, provide a wide variety of services and supports to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They work in a number of different settings. They work in people's homes and in community-based settings. And as I mentioned before, while the Department of Labor, through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, collects data on direct support professionals, they don't separate it out. It's usually rolled up or combined with other direct care workers. And this is challenging for lots of reasons, as we've already discussed. So let's talk about some key takeaways from today's conversation. The first is that DSPs are part of a group of workers who play an incredibly important role in our economy and in the lives of many, many, many people. Demand for direct care workers and direct support professionals is expected to increase due to aging demographics in the United States. The direct care workforce is becoming increasingly diverse, and research indicates that many members of this workforce do not feel included in the workplace. There are not enough opportunities for advancement for those who want to further develop in their careers, as satisfying and as meaningful as they find their work to be. And finally, wages are not competitive or particularly appealing to many workers outside of this sector. And so, what can we do? What must be done? What should we do? We need to invest in training and professional development. Frontline supervisors play such an integral role in all of this. Truly, they do. And they need ongoing training. We can't expect them to take on the extra responsibility of helping people understand what opportunities lie ahead or what skills are needed to move forward without any additional supports. So employers are going to have to make that investment and support as supervisors in really doing that type of additional work. Part of that is establishing development plans with frontline workers to help them make the connection between where they are and what they want to do. So how do you establish a career development plan and a pathway? And we know this is just not the work of frontline supervisors and managers alone. It takes an entire team, dare I say, an entire village to put the supports around this workforce to make this a reality. But it can be done. Develop training opportunities to help employees further develop their skills, especially interpersonal skills, which I view as the secret sauce to advancement. Without the ability to effectively get along with other people, to talk to people, to listen to people, to treat people well, opportunities for growth professionally are extremely limited. And there are ways frontline supervisors who are closer to frontline staff can help in identifying what employees are doing extremely well and any opportunities for these staff members to grow and further hone their experience, their skill sets, excuse me. So what can we do? And what are we doing? We're working to build out our training function for frontline staff, supervisors, and managers. And dare I say, at Heritage Christian Services, our employees have told us this is something that they are really very interested in. And I'm very pleased to report that we've heard them and we are going to move this forward as quickly and as effectively as we possibly can. Oh, here's something that we talk about a lot, and it's partly due to the competitive labor market in which we find ourselves, as well as the demand on services for direct care workers, which is recruitment and retention of staff. So very, very important. You know, when we looked at maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, organizations like Heritage Christian Services probably never envisioned that Burger King and Target and all these other retail outlets would be their competitors for talent. But that's our reality now, that those particular outlets are looking for similar types of people to provide service in their industries. It's very intense. It's very intense. And yet, it can't keep us from working to develop effective strategies to recruit and retain staff. Many of the things we talked about, particularly career development, training and development opportunities, an increased focus on DEI, all will help with retention. Recruitment continues to be a challenge. We know that when we don't have adequate staffing, whether it's in an organization like Heritage Christian Services, or it's in a home health care agency, or whether it's in a hospital or wherever, lack of staff impacts employee morale and engagement, negatively impacts that employees' work-life balance experience, and ultimately does not lead to a positive experience for those who are receiving services and supports. Again, the employee experience is directly correlated to the experience of those we support and serve. So we're going to continue to develop strategies to recruit and retain staff. We're going to set clear expectations for staffing in what we know is a highly competitive labor market, and we're going to leverage technology to support our recruitment efforts. We're going to have to bring our very best game plan to this endeavor because it is very, very intense. And personally, I don't see it changing anytime in the near future. So let's move on. We need to communicate, and communicate every step of the way to our employees that they matter and what their experience is matters to us. So communication isn't me okay, I know I'm doing this now, but it isn't me talking without someone talking back to me. This is a unique situation. But normally what we want to have is two-way conversation. Someone talks, someone listens. Let me rephrase that. An employee talks, I listen, I take what they say, I act upon it. I talk to the employee and tell them what has happened as a result of their feedback. They tell me, oh, that's great, but can you do this? I go back, reflect on it, take action on it, talk back to the employee. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for an ongoing process of two-way conversation, listening, speaking, and of course, some action, and keeping both parties informed in the process. It's okay. It's so critical. It's so critical. That tells employees, you matter. What you say to us matters. We appreciate you taking the time and telling us how you feel. And not only that, we're acting on your feedback, and this is what we're doing. It holds us into account, and it builds trust, which is really important. Employees need to feel they belong within an organization. We talked about that earlier, how particular groups feel that they're not quite in the organization, that they seem to feel marginalized or excluded. We need to work on that because when people feel that way, that's when they're more inclined to want to leave. And we don't want people to leave. We don't want to deal with high levels of turnover because that undermines service quality of our organizations. We want to create a culture where all workers are treated with respect, and we want to be able to communicate that to employees and get their feedback. And finally, we talked about this earlier, our workforce cultures should be based on respect, inclusion, a celebration of diversity, and merit. So here, we're going to continue to build on our agency meetings and allow for a two-way exchange of information. We're going to refine our leader update, which is our communications to frontline staff about what's happening within the organization. And we're going to explore ways to effectively, consistently, and accurately communicate with all members of our workforce, especially our direct support professionals, our frontline staff, so that we are communicating in every way that their experience matters to us. And last but certainly not least, commitment to paying competitive wages and providing relevant benefits. We need to develop pay practices which are easily communicated and understood. People want to know, how did you come up with this number to pay me? And how do I get to a different number? And don't tell me something that I need an advanced degree to understand. Tell it to me in a way that's plain, that I can get and I can take action on. Commit to ensuring internal equity within the organization. We heard earlier that different groups are reporting, and research supports this, that oftentimes in organization there are disparities based on gender, based on race, based on ethnicity. Those have to go away. People should be paid. Previous slide, merit and their contributions to the organization and skill. So we have to work on that. All employers have to work on that. And we need to establish career pathways that reward employees for acquiring new skills. So here we're working on a compensation project to promote competitive wages and ensure internal equity. We're going to access our utilization of benefit programs. We're going to enhance communication about agency benefits to all benefit eligible employees. Get their feedback. What do you think? How's this working for you? What don't you like? What do you like? What should we know about the benefit experience that we don't already know? It's all important information. And we're going to reevaluate our tuition reimbursement benefit program because our employers told us, can you take another look at the tuition reimbursement program? And so we'll do that. And so finally, what can we do? What can we all do in this space? Well, we can change the public narrative. And I'm going to apologize for this slide because I could not find the document that Robert Espinoza, who's with PHI, uses to introduce this work. But these three words, these three phrases on this slide are his work. So I want to give him credit. He talks about the public perception about direct care workers that needs to change. One, that direct care work is not visible, it's invisible, that it's not skilled, it's unskilled work, and that it's criminal. And you might say, nah, I never heard that. And I'm going to maybe remind you that you do. So we talked about direct care work as being essential. And we talked about the fact that direct care, not direct care workers specifically, but certainly direct support professionals do not have a standard federal occupational code. Therefore, it's very difficult for guidance counselors, vocational education counselors to introduce this profession to students, middle school, high school, as a possible career path. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the Occupational Outlook Handbook. It's invisible. It's invisible as a career. The work we know is multifaceted. The work that direct care workers do is highly skilled, and requires, to do it well, very highly developed interpersonal skills, to say the least. To classify this work as unskilled is categorically incorrect. And then finally, direct care work is not criminal. The people who work in this field are not criminals. The allegations that, or the assertions that people have to lock up their goods when people come in their homes to provide care, or you can't have any valuables around you, is just unfair. Every profession has people who are not trustworthy, and to categorize a whole group of workers that way is just not right. We can help in changing the public narrative. One way to do that is to go to Heritage Christian Services website and look to and click on the advocacy tab and engage in advocacy around these issues. The other thing is, when you're reading an article in the newspaper of your choice, and you read an article about home care workers or direct support professionals or direct care workers in general, and it has one of these invisible, unskilled, there are criminal types of themes in them, embedded in them, you can write in the comments and say that's not fair, or you can ask the editor, when are you going to write a story about people who do this work, do it exceptionally well, and have done it for a very, very long time, and the impact that they're making on lives of people in our communities? How about a great, really feel-good story about that? That's what we need, because if we continue down this path with this negative narrative, who's going to want to do this work? What will be the compelling reason for them to really want to spend their lives doing this type of work, which we already know is incredibly valuable, dare I say, essential. So at this point, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk about something that clearly I'm very passionate about. And I'm not alone here at Heritage Christian Services. This is absolutely top of mind work for us here. So thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My email address and the link to the survey is in the chat, and I will be sending out a recording of this along with the survey later this week. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Donna, again for that wonderful presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you.